Welcome to yet another episode of the African Storyteller Podcast, where we share Africa's stories of growth and prosperity. We talk to leaders that are making a huge difference in building the Africa that we want to see. And today we are happy to bring you the doyen of executive search in Africa. Her name is Auguste Coetzer, and she's been around since 1990, basically placing most of the private and public sector CEOs and executive leaders that are key in shaping Africa's economies, and most importantly, that are key in building the next level of leaders for Africa. So welcome, Auguste, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm honored to have you.
And it's a pleasure to be here with you, Thuli. I often listen to your stories.
Oh, wow. Thank you. At least somebody's watching and listening. And I'm happy that, you have actually agreed to join us today, because there's so much to talk about. You are actually respected as the one who is a kingmaker for most of this private sector and public sector leadership placements, and you've been around for more than 34 years, and so much has happened in 34 years. We will try and actually compress 34 years, in this 1 hour as best as we can. I don't think we'll do enough justice to it, but where do we start? Tell us about Auguste. How did it start?
By original qualification, I'm a clinical psychologist, which means I am interested in people. The difference is between what I do today is the people I deal with are normal people, hopefully normal.
Hopefully.
And that's stimulating, because the people I meet, I also try and learn from them.
Yes.
And that stimulates me.
What does it take to be a leader in Africa at this present moment?
I think the first thing is your integrity and your honesty. And know what you say is public. You can be crucified for a little comment you made 15 years ago. We will know it, because we check everything. Your credit, your criminal, your qualifications, your references. There's nothing that we leave unturned.
So if we actually look at the private sector, right, pretty much we still see quite a lot of gray-haired, old, veterans that are actually leading, especially listed companies. Can we actually say ageism is a thing at that level?
Then you're referring to my age? No, I'm just joking. No, I'm proud of my age.
Yes.
I think it's to stay relevant. You can be 80 years old and still very relevant, or you can be 40 years old and be totally irrelevant. It's your ability to adjust to the changing world. And to be rigid is a death sentence in today's successful business world. You have to adjust and quickly think on your feet and react.
So we've actually just touched on integrity. Now we're touching on agility, and basically being globally, astute and know what's happening around the world, and obviously locally relevant and know what's happening locally. I mean, we see quite a lot of big corporations basically, honoring the wishes and the demands of the shareholder. We see quite a lot of public sector leadership basically responding to what the environment, the ordinary people, on the street is basically expecting, out of them. Are we ever going to get to a point where the person that's on the street, as part of the environment, is actually prioritized equally by both the private and the public sectors?
That's $1 million question, and I wish I had the answer. I think we shouldn't make a difference between the two. Whether I'm the CEO of a public sector company or the CEO of a listed company, my priorities is to deliver according to my mandate. And if I can do that directly or indirectly, I'll serve the public.
And are we starting to see more and more women coming into this high-level, high-pressured leadership roles, and how are they doing?
I'm part of a very fortunate group, which are successful women, the IWFSA, if I may mention it.
Absolutely.
And those people are really inspiring people. but they came up the tough and hard way. They worked for it. The difficulty today is for the younger generation to really, I can almost say, stick it out.
Yes, yeah.
There seems to be, I don't fit into this environment, I pack my things and I go. It's when you don't fit in, that's when you should make a difference, not just for you to fit in, but also to influence the people around you.
So the younger generation basically is lacking in terms of staying power.
There's some brilliant young people coming through. I mean, I've got some mentees.
Yes.
What I can learn from that mentees, I tell you.
They're very brilliant, by the way. You know, our young people are like smart. They're
Exactly.
smarties, yeah.
And don't think they're not going to, argue with you. But that's what I like.
Yes.
To differ doesn't mean you criticize.
Absolutely.
And I think that is where emotional maturity come in and emotional intellect come in. That you can take criticism in a more positive and effective way and not see it as negative.
Yes. Who are some of the people that you have actually placed, over the past years that are actually known? Give us the scoop. And, how difficult was it to actually find and place them?
Look, we sign confidentiality agreements, but not just with our clients, also with our candidates. But some are mentioned in the public, like some books are written. For me, I'm as good as the last person I've placed. I can place 10 good people and I stuff it up with one placement and people remember me for the negative.
They're like, that is Auguste's candidate.
Yeah, and they will say. Yeah. So on that, I always try and give 5 very good shortlisted candidates.
Yes.
But then it's for the committee that interview them to make the decision. And unfortunately, the weaker the CEO, the weaker the candidates on the shortlist he or she will appoint. Strong CEOs appoint strong people. And strong CEOs, if they don't know, they ask. Or they'll say, I don't know. There's nothing wrong in don't knowing.
How much scrutiny goes into basically ensuring that you've got the right candidate? Whether it's security clearance, whether it's psychometrics, what really happens before you appoint the candidate? And I'm asking this because in recent years, you would actually have even board members that are said to be delinquent. You would actually have CEOs that are actually said to have fake qualifications. You've got all of these people and you ask yourself, what process do they go through? Do they go through being scrutinized? What's the standard process that you would go through to appointing a leader?
First of all, it's your track record. And I'm as good as the brief my board give me to recruit. In other words, this is what we want, this is what we don't want. So the brief is very important. And we would then prioritize what is the most important and what is the least important. But I do that with a selection committee. So by the time I report back, I give them a whole report saying, I've had a look at 50 candidates. Of these 50 candidates, 10 don't want the job. Why don't they want the job? I try and give them that direct feedback too. Today, good people can choose where they work.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they're not going to, they look at boards and they're not going to look at boards that don't perform. The reference checking and all that comes last. It's your track record and your track record and your qualifications and what you've delivered. And sometimes we mustn't be shy to say I was fired, because people can get fired for being honest. And in the past, to be fired was a big negative.
Yes, yeah.
Today, if some person says to me, look, I've been fired from this job, then I would ask why, and you'd be surprised what comes out.
So basically, good people get the boot if they're in a bad place or with bad company.
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually quite interesting. And what are some of the trends that you're starting to see in, the human capital space? So much has actually changed. 34 years, give or take, is actually quite a long time, in terms of what's happening, in the business environment.
I think the biggest today challenge is competencies and our education. I'm sorry to say that our education system is not delivering quality people that can be employed.
What's the solution with that?
I think we must be more critical in terms of our educational system, and especially also at schools. That's why so many private schools exist, because they really focus on being relevant in terms of positioning this child to be able to find a job in the future. But qualifications is very, very important. A good MBA will always stand you in good stead. So I am for a good education and good formal qualifications as well. But we mustn't look down on technical qualifications. We need technical skills in this country. But it's what you do with your education. Yeah. And I think we should be more entrepreneurial. I mustn't finish university and say, I must find a job. Can't I finish university and say, what business can I start? Be self-employed, be relevant. So I think there's too much emphasis on finding a job. It should be, what can I do for myself and create employment? I think there's many hurdles in this country to start businesses. And I think we should try and simplify the process to start businesses.
So, Auguste, so much has changed. So many things have actually happened. What are some of the trends that you're actually starting to see? For example, how are companies building climate smart workforces beyond just the board level? Because climate change has actually become such a very integral and important part of just our day-to-day lives, not even just business, but literally day-to-day, our own personal life.
I think people are becoming more aware of climate change. How climate smart are you in your personal living? It's no matter help you at work, don't litter, but you go home and you litter. So it's trying to your habits to also transcend them into your personal life. Today it's about sustainability. And let's, for instance, just say this flood now in Spain, in Valencia. What's going to happen to those businesses? How prepared were they? And we mustn't think that it's not happening in South Africa. The snow in the Drakensberg a while ago, I think we should create the workforce to think in terms of not just sustainability, but how do I contribute to that sustainability. And often it seems that work climate change is board level stuff. It's not. It should be taken down to the lowest level of employees. For instance, let's take corporate travel. How many corporates don't travel in these smart jets? Is that being corporate smart in terms of climate change?
I think the carbon footprint that is caused by big business is just horrendous.
So there's a delicate balance between who I am in the workplace, who I am at my home, and what do I do also for my society.
So I think essentially we're just saying we need to build overall good citizens, whether it's good corporate citizens or good private citizens. We just need to actually have good citizenry, going around. I also think if you look at a country like ours that has a huge gap between those who have and those who do not have, an argument can be made that, being climate smart is basically for the privileged, because if I am from the township where I am still be using a taxi to go to work, burning firewood to actually cook my food, and basically living in a highly dense environment where littering is just almost impossible to avoid, how do I prioritize, basically actually being more environmentally conscious and friendly when I've got basic needs? Is there a role that companies could actually play to contribute towards creating, churches, schools, and I think knock-on effect, then basically a country that has citizens that are climate smart? What role can big corporates play in that regard?
The first thing is service delivery. Those more poorer areas that are littered all over, that are dirty, where's the service delivery in collecting the garbage, in cleaning up that environment? Because you can't expect people to live clean, to use a dustbin, but the dustbin is always full.
Absolutely.
What must I do? That's where we should encourage not just us to, but also for the service deliveries to take place. Our municipalities, for instance, what are they doing? Water security, water pollution.
So what role can big business play in ensuring that, government has the right resources, the right, finances to actually ensure that service delivery is filtered down to the lowest level of the population? Because we can talk climate smart all we want, unless the person that's sitting in Alexandra Township, unless the person sitting in Tembisa Township can basically feel that their own environment has improved and is being supported, they are not going to prioritize understanding and having this conversation or even participating in this whole, paradigm change or paradigm shift.
One mustn't just look at corporates. We should be starting the question to our service delivery departments, government departments, to also deliver. I think we do not, we've become so complacent that we don't demand better service. Because if my environment is clean, I'm going to live cleaner. I'm very worried about the water situation. So in Soweto, I know there are places that for 3 days didn't have water. How does those people survive without water?
Well, we now and again don't have water for days, and it's actually in the suburban areas
as well.
So I think water has no sort of demographic concentration. The challenges with water are just spread across. In Cape Town at some point they were nearing day zero, and that's Cape Town. We've got tourists, you've got affluent people, you've got people that can afford, but they could not actually afford the most basic resource, which is also a human right, and that's just water. So I agree with you that water is actually something that needs to, be prioritized, isn't like yesterday. But having said that, in order for us to understand the importance of our role, government's role, big businesses' role, I think we almost all need to be having a conversation around the same sort of topical issues that, impact and touch on our lives. Big businesses rely on water as well, same as electricity and power. And maybe the conversation then is, human resources in any company is basically the heartbeat of the company. That is the people that have an influence on a captive audience of people that are leaders in their communities, are leaders in their homes, are leaders in the country in their own respective ways as well. What role can the function of human resources, play in actually creating a society that has good morals, a society that speaks truth to power, a society that is patriotic, and most importantly, a society that has a passion to build a better, South Africa and Africa for all?
I think we've got too many meetings and too many decision makers.
Yes,
where's the action plans, and who's going to monitor the implementation of that action plans? That's where we're lacking. We talk, but where is the delivery? So I think not just in the workplace, but in our personal lives, we should be more focusing on delivery and not what my company can do. What can I do? For instance, you leave your lights on all night. you're using too much electricity.
So there's actually quite a huge need for education and awareness, because some of those people are not even aware that they are contributing to this problem that we have.
Education and information, but practical information. I've seen the other day a very upmarket school bus, and what shall I see? The kids is throwing a Coke blicky out. Now, I mean, one should then say, who is looking after the kids that's driving in that bus? The driver should stop and say, go and pick up that tin.
But the driver is employed to drive the kids back home.
Yes, but he also has got a responsibility to sustainable living.
Absolutely. I think also just as parents and as society, we need to instill the right values to our children.
And to ourselves.
All these young people, most of them are qualified, have gone through university, and most companies say they are unemployable. And you wonder what will happen, what should happen with a young person that has a PhD, a young person that has a master's, a young person that has 2 degrees, that is not being absorbed.
Well, it's a broader economical factor. I can't employ people if I haven't got work for the people to do. So it's a catch-22.
Yes.
Where do you start? I don't think it's only the corporate sector that must create employment, but the government sector can also create, but relevant employment. And if you work for a government sector, when last did you had a good performance appraisal? We seem to be appointing and not appraising and working out the weaker, or not the weaker, the dead wit. There's some people that whilst in 10 o'clock in the morning and whilst out 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Who's monitoring that? So if they were all working, we can create more employment by a more sustainable economic growth. And corruption, we have to do something about corruption. How many billions are not just disappearing with no delivery?
I think it's actually quite hard, and I think a part of me just really wished somebody could basically say, yes, now there's a policy that if you are in Gauteng and the universities in Gauteng have churned out X number of graduates, you need to actually take 1% from the universities in your province. I don't know. But it's becoming very clearer and clearer, that universities are going to churn out the graduates. The graduates are going to increase the number of graduates that are sitting at home, and actually the parents still need to look after them. And I think that, does not actually sit well with us building the next, pipeline of leaders, and also having a population that is active in building and growing the economy. If we have so many young people that are basically sitting at home, if I'm a parent and I'm working so hard and I'm taking my last bit of money to ensure that my child has the best education, has gone through university, to come back and sit at home, who is to blame in the system?
I don't know who's to blame, but what I can say, we should never underestimate our informal economy. Yeah. I think one of the things is to grow the informal economy, and not just to think I must work for a big corporate. Smaller companies are as creative and lucrative to work for. In Japan, I think there's something like only 30% of the workforce are employed in formal company employment. The rest are all self-sufficient smaller businesses. We must look after our smaller businesses.
So government and big companies need to do more to actually empower smaller companies or the SME sector, so that the SME sector can absorb more people into formal/informal employment. Awesome. So I just think, for me, the key takeaways are: to be a great leader, you need to have integrity. You need to have an excellent track record. you need to actually be the driving force of a workforce that is very climate smart and is aware of the environment. You need to actually be honest and understand that information and stuff that you do is actually easily accessible and is at the disposal of the people that are recruiting you. And most importantly, we need to actually ensure that government does excellent service delivery and everybody supports the SME sector so that we can get the economy going and we can get more young people employed and we can actually encourage people to have an entrepreneurial mindset and start their own companies, be they small or big or medium, in order to ensure that we are not just waiting to actually get employed. So there's a whole mind shift or paradigm shift that needs to happen. We need to unlearn a lot of the things that we have learned, because everything that we do up until now is just how we have lived our life.
I think as parents to also set an example that what did you do to achieve? And I think the generations today are tough, but we need to maybe be more smart in terms of the skills we develop and our own delivery. I cannot just look at my boss to help me to do things. What can I do for my boss? And I think that's also the mind change. It's not the boss for me, but what can I do for my boss?
Okay, and what are some of the skills that are actually in demand right now? You know, what are the things that you should be doing now in order for you to, you know, to survive in this very fast-changing environment?
Understanding business. Be able to read a balance sheet. Do you know? I mean, your own budget. Have you had a look at your budget and see what are you doing wrong or right? Start with your own personal budget. Being financially astute is most important today, not just in business, but also in your personal life. And I think to remember that South Africa isn't in isolation, that what happens in the global and the world also affects South Africa.
And as we actually wrap up, a lot of companies are saying that they cannot find the right candidates, local candidates, to fill up certain positions. South Africa pushes back and says we've got enough skilled people in our country and we would like you to consider getting locals, so that we basically transform our leadership landscape. What are your observations in that regard?
I think we should really have an open mind in bringing in talent from abroad. We can all learn from international qualified people. Just as many South Africans are working in London or wherever, we should also open our minds to those people to work in our country. It's reverse mentoring. What I can get from there, I can apply here and vice versa. Yeah. So I'm really for international movement of skills. I think that would benefit the global economy.
I actually think this conversation is happening at the right time, because we often ask ourselves where to from here in terms of leadership. How are these people actually appointed? How do they get into these roles? But most importantly, I think you've actually touched on some of the things that we probably are needing answers for, but we are really not sure if, the leaders that you guys bring into the leadership roles are even thinking about them, are being measured on them, So thank you so much for having us, having joined us, and we are happy, that you did make time for us today, and really honored once again that you could join us. So thank you.
Thanks, Thuli. I really enjoyed it. And let's create a work environment of no littering.